Hello and welcome along to the VMTV Rugby Pod. Looking ahead to Brisbane on Saturday, first test of the Lions against Australia. Very much looking forward to this one. Alan Quinlan is taking the flight across the world through every city, I think, Alan. But you're jet lagged, but you're ready to go. And you're probably buzzing. How long have you been in Melbourne and Brisbane? And what's the situation with you right now?
Yeah, well, I flew landed in Melbourne last night, Australian time, around 11:30, and couldn't get up to Brisbane on a connecting flight until this morning. So, yeah, long journey, left Wednesday afternoon, and the jet lag is kicking in a little bit today. All right, it's about 11 o'clock here, and Friday night, and the eve of the test, I was out for some food, and there's a lot of excitement building in around Brisbane in the city centre here. There was an AFL game on in the Gabba tonight as well, so that was pretty full. And but yeah, I think there's a lot of Lions supporters around here now. You can kind of sense that. I passed through the Aussie team hotel tonight. I was meeting colleagues there, and I ended up meeting Joe Schmidt and Laurie Fisher. Laurie used to coach me in Munster, who was there for a number of years, and bumped into Joe as well. So yeah, didn't really get
Did
in.
you get on? What tactics did you get?
Didn't get
You
into any
suss anything
tactics,
out?
to be honest. I was being fair with them, and didn't want to be kind of saying, "Oh, what's the plan for tomorrow and what are you going to do?" It was just general chit chat. Look, I think they know, and everybody knows that the Lions are the favourites here. There's a lot of powerful players in that Lions team. Probably had their best performance, funny enough, against the Invitational Australia-New Zealand team last week. We expected that, last Wednesday, that they would cause them a few problems. I think if you assess the tour overall so far, it's been kind of fits and starts for this Lions team. Understandably, I think if you kind of understand the concept of all these players coming together and trying to get combinations and all that kind of stuff together, and gelling, and the real business starts tomorrow. It's all about these test matches, and I'm sure Joe, they didn't have a huge amount of prep. Obviously they beat Fiji. They played one kind of warm-up game, and so they're kind of going into the game a little bit, you could argue, a little bit undercooked. But I think the Lions are the favourites. I think everybody knows that. So yeah, I'm kind of not name dropping there. I know Joe from his time in Ireland, and obviously I know Laurie very well as well from his time at Munster. So it was nice just to see them. They seem very relaxed. Funny enough, Stuart, the culture here is quite relaxed around media stuff, and access to players, and it's probably a thing that it's different for us in the Northern Hemisphere, that it's all strict protocols about when you can get players and when you can't, and they just seem, it's always been very relaxed, and how I gauged that was probably here in 2018 when I came out here and I was doing commentary for the 3 tests when Ireland played here. The access in around the Australian team at the time, Michael Checker was the coach, was so relaxed. I remember we went on a Tuesday, Mark Robson and we were doing this commentary for Sky, and we went to the Australian training session with a view to interviewing maybe 2 players for Sky. We met their media manager at training, and he just said, like, pick and choose who you want. Go into the dressing room with the players, you can walk around. It was just so relaxed. I'm not saying it's always like that, but I think their concept and their approach to probably media, maybe it's different because they're always trying to promote rugby here, the challenge of the AFL and the NFL here, which kind of overshadows the rugby union sometimes. So I sensed that tonight in the team hotel with the Australians. The players were kind of moving around freely, and they seem very, very relaxed. Obviously, they have a big challenge tomorrow. They're playing a team that's favoured to beat them on home soil in Brisbane. So, but the excitement is building, and who knows? I think Andy Farrell and his coaches and players will want to hit the ground running, and by their selection, I think it's a very powerful side. They could have changed
Just
a
as
couple
you
of
say that,
combinations.
we'll run through the selection because we'll go all the way through it. Genge, Shane, Furlong, Itoje, McCarthy, Byrne at 6, Curry, Conan, Gibson, Park, Russell, Lowe, Tuipulotu, Jones, Freeman, and Hugo Keenan. So that's the 15. We'll also talk about the bench later on, but 8 Irish in that starting 15, a record since 2009, 11 in the 23. As an overall squad, Alan, let's maybe zone in on the back row. Is that the area you thought might differ in your eyes, or was this actually the 15 to 23 you thought he'd go for?
No, I think most people thought that Ollie Chesham would probably start at 6, given that Ty Byrne, started against the Australian invitational side last week. I think the back row could change. It could have been changed. Any number of players could have been, and combinations could have went there, and they all would have performed really well. I think you hear the word balance a lot with back row, Stuart. I think for me, I'm always of the opinion, unless you're playing on a really, and you could argue the Australians are going to try and bring a lot of pace and tempo to the game in their attack. And obviously, if there's huge back row threats, you might go with 2 7s. It's not a traditional thing that Northern Hemisphere teams do. I think Australia did that a number of years ago with David Pocock and Michael Hooper. Such good 7s, and the conundrum at the time that Michael Cheika had was, can I get the two of them on the field at the same time and wreak havoc in the opposition? And they played a lot, both 6 and 7, and they're both more natural 7s when they played and outstanding at the breakdown. But this back row is, I think Jack Conan is the most natural number 8. He plays there the most. I think the rest of them are all 6s and 7s. Of course, Ben Earl has played 8 for England on a number of occasions. Started as a 7 probably. Has played 6 as well. Tom Curry has played 6, 7, and a little bit of 8 as well at times. Pollock can play at 8 as well. Henry Pollock can as well. Yeah, I think
Welsh player
yeah,
23.
I know, and that's hard for Welsh
hard
people to
to
take. And I've spoken, met lots of Lions Welsh fans around the hotel and around the streets today, and it's all they're talking about really is the disappointment of not having. And historically, we always see a number of Welsh players in the Lions selection. That's just the history of the Lions. You go back and start talking about iconic figures, and there's a lot of Welsh players you end up naming, and you hear people talk about in the history of the Lions. So it's disappointing, very disappointing. I think Scotland are probably in the best position they've been for a long time as regards their representation. When you look at that midfield of 10, 12 and 13, Blair Kinghorn, you could probably argue, possibly could be starting ahead of Hugo Keenan if he hadn't picked up that injury.
But do you think it would have gone the other way then if Ringrose had been fit?
It could. Yeah, that's the other.
He's sort of been not.
That's the other conundrum. I think
he was against Wales off the bench as well.
I think the problem that Bundyaki faced here was when Gary Ringrose got injured, because I think I mentioned the word combinations at the start, and just knowing the players around you, and it's a very important area, that centre partnership, because communication is the key in attack and defence. Little habits that one or the other does that players understand and know when you play regularly against them. So that could have went the other way, but if Ringrose was fit. But there's nothing here jumping out, Stuart, that anybody can argue and say, that weakens this team. Of course, if Australia won tomorrow and the Lions didn't perform well, we'll say at the breakdown or something, well, then you can be arguing that Josh van der Fleer and Jack Morgan should have started at 7, or one of them or two of them should have been on the bench, to change that up in the middle of the game. Ben Earl probably has the best stats out of all the back rows between carries and tackles and impacts in the game. So there's merit in everybody's arguments about all these individuals. I think Jack Conan, as I mentioned, is probably of course, you can play a number of these players at number 8 as well, but he's the most natural number 8, if you know what I mean. He plays there
Why is it,
the
Alan? I was
most.
actually thinking about this, or someone was speaking to about Jack Conan. He's not really, over the last while, yes, injuries, hasn't been a regular starter for Ireland, but the last couple of Lions tours, he's been at 8.
Yeah, well, I think Caelan Doris has shown the last 3-4 years that he's just world class, and Caelan Doris would have been on this tour as well if he hadn't picked up that shoulder injury.
But even fitting him elsewhere in the back row, or is it just Solis and 8? And you're like,
no, Jack Conan can play 6 as well, so it's but I think when you go to your regular position, and that's where you want to be the best, and I think Jack Conan probably has played there the most. I know, as I said, Ben Earl or Pollock could play there. Pollock is a rookie, really, you know what I mean? He's so young, and people will argue maybe he should be on the bench. But look, I think he's picked a team here that he believes is the form team. When I saw Tom Curry playing against Ireland in Six Nations in the opening round in Dublin, I thought, this guy's back to his best. He's had a lot of injuries the last few years. When he came on the scene first 4, 5, 6 years ago, he was just phenomenal. Young player, so many moments in the game, positive moments, wreaking havoc at the breakdown. He's just a wrecking ball. He's powerful and physical as well. So, we know that Andy Farrell backs people that he feels can step up to the plate. He loves characters, and they're all different characters. They all have strengths. You shouldn't be finding loads of weaknesses in a Lions player, essentially, because they're not just an international quality player, they're top class internationals. So there's top class internationals right across the board here. Jack Morgan is very unlucky. It's just a competitive area. I myself, I just feel he's very, very unlucky. I think he's been a phenomenal player.
So if you were the coach, where would you slot him in? On this 23? Do you think Burns fortunate to get in at 6?
I think he's had a decent Lions tour, but yeah, I think his form and the quality. And look, Andy Farrell knows Tyburn inside out. So sometimes if you don't see that famous blue scrum cap getting all these turnovers, you think Tyburn is having a quiet game, or he's not having a standout game. But he's just always in positions and places that sometimes the opposition don't go because they know he's there. He fills gaps in defensive lines so effectively. His intelligence to read the game is superb. So you think, unless something goes wrong tomorrow or changes the opinion, everybody knows, if they're being fair and balanced, people know Tyburn has been world class for the last number of years, and he gets the backing. And he's the type of fellow who you'd be very surprised if he doesn't have a big game, because he loves these occasions and he always steps up to the plate in big games. So could you have had a back row of Josh van der Veer, Jack Morgan and Ben Earl? Of course, yeah, but I think you're taking away that line out option. I think it's with Joe McCarthy starting the second row. I think that just you want to try and find that position for a Chesham or for a Tyburn, and Tyburn, you can't say that he doesn't deserve it, because we know he's a world-class player. Chesham has done great, and he's a really good player as well. So he could change this pack up next week and put Andrew Porter in at loose head, put Roland Keller in hooker, put Will Stewart in as tight head. He could put Scott Cummings and Chesham in the second row, and then as the players I mentioned in the back row, and they're still all really top class players. So it's a very strong, powerful pack, and it's an area where I think they'll go after Australia.
They all seem to be big carriers. You've talked about the power, but surely that's going through the coach's mind. Yes, so are the bench and the guys you mentioned that could come in next week, but this specific 1-8 seemed to me brute big boys.
Yeah, I think if you look at that front 5, Stuart, they're all ball carriers. And the more ball carriers you can have in your team, obviously you don't want 8 of your forwards carrying all the time. But if you can have the luxury of them doing their primary job first and foremost, i.e. they're scrummaging for the props, their lifting in the line out, their ability to defend mauls, their physical strength, their catch pass skills, all that kind of stuff is great to have. Of course, the fundamentals have to be right first, particularly in those positions. There's no point in having, a hooker in there who's a great ball carrier but doesn't throw well in the line out. It's not feasible to have that situation. So all these players, the extra layers they have are that ability to carry ball. And it's unusual to have so many because it's something, a great luxury that he has. Joe McCarthy's it's such a physical, powerful athlete as well. He's destructive in mauls. Itoje is non-stop, harassing the opposition, trying to get the ball back, slowing breakdowns. So they all have strengths. Of course, it's how they protect the ball, the Australians, and they'll be very, very well aware of that. I think they're going to kick a fair bit. They're going to try and turn the lines and not overplay. And try and find that territory. It all sounds very simplistic, and I just think they've got to limit their mistakes. The Lions have turned the ball over a lot. If there's any weakness in this line side, things have broken down a lot, and they've been sloppy with their catch pass and their cohesion in their attack at times. And a lot of the tries they've got have been that power. So it's a big challenge for Australia. Can they physically kind of man up and make those one-on-one powerful gain line impacts, and that's the challenge for them. I'm just not sure they have that physical power. I think if you have Valentini in there and Skelton, they certainly can disrupt the Lions pack a little bit, but it kind of it's looking like that this line selection is all about physical power and strength and brute force. I think it's not solely about that, but I think it's an added advantage that you have and an added luxury that Andy Farrell has, that all these players are very good footballers as well.
Let's segue, you talked about it briefly, to the Australian team. Let's say there was a fly half, unfortunate injury for him. He's out. Tom Line, on one occasion, 22-year-old, first start for Australia once he got 4 or 5 caps. Valentini, Skelton, they're injured. And then Nick de Crepini, 29-year-old, spent a bit of time at Cast, now at the Force. He gets a debut in the back row. They've played Fiji. The ending for them was a joyful one, but it wasn't exactly going to plan, ticking all their boxes. We always talk about, or we did for years, this Joe Schmidt, it's all okay when you have him. And, he'll make something happen, and he's not that good. He's got the master plan. It's hard to know, where do you see this Australia team at? How much are they underdogs on Saturday? I guess it's a 5, 10 point, 15 point game. Too hard to tell.
Yeah, they are underdogs, and I think it's. But I expect them to raise their intensity. Obviously, they played Fiji last a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. They looked very good at times in what they were doing and dominant at times, but then, as Fiji can always do, they can cut you apart with some moments of brilliance, and they did find gaps and opportunities against Australia, and it took a Harry Wilson try late on for Australia to win the game. It was a try disallowed as well that probably shouldn't have been disallowed, so they could have lost that. So I think on what we've seen so far, that we saw moments last November when
The England game, last play.
Yeah, particularly the England game, but I think they caused Ireland some problems as well. I think they have ability to, if they get the quality ball, they can. It's in their DNA, isn't it, to run and move and offload and try and play quick with tempo. If they get the right quality of ball, I think that back three is very, very dangerous. Harry Potter, Tom Wright, Jorgensen, they're very, very dangerous, deceptive players. Joseph Sualihi, what a player he is, what a talent. Yeah, he's a phenomenal player. So I think the challenge here, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this one out, it's what's going to happen up front. Alan Alatoa and James Slipper, they've got to get a scrum right for the Australians, and I think Fraser McWright is someone that he definitely had 4, if not 5 turnovers, penalties against Ireland in November. If he can get after the Lions ball and cause them problems, that'll be a massive boost for them. And you mentioned Tom Lynagh. Obviously, he's very, very young and experienced. He's a very good footballer. He's a really good kicking game. I think that's been a problem for Australia the last few years. Their halfbacks, continuity, getting a combination to play on a regular basis and perform for Australia has been a challenge. So there's pressure on them, lots of ifs and buts, but on the balance of what we've seen and the form that sporadic form they've shown Australia, I think, rightly so, the Lions with 4 countries coming together and a lot of these players chomping at the bit in putting on that Lions jersey, I think it gives them an edge. But I'm really, we've always said it about Joe in Ireland, haven't we? He's always pulled some sort of a rabbit out of the hat, whether it be for Leinster or for Ireland, particularly with a strategy of finding some weakness or opportunity. So I don't think they're going to overcomplicate it tomorrow, the Australians, in the sense of they're not going to start flinging the ball around their own 22 and throwing caution to the wind. I think they're going to have a solid platform of trying to compete, trying to win those little moments. And I expect Lynagh and Jake Gordon to kick a lot and try and challenge the Lions back 3 of Hugo Keenan and Freeman and James Lowe. We know all 3 are very, very good in the air, and we've seen lots of evidence of that in the last couple of years. So, most teams back 3 players now are good in the air. They get selected on the basis of being able to catch up and unders and box kicks and stuff. And there's so many of them in the modern game. And obviously, with the change in the law of the trail runners running back, blocking off people, it's a very effective weapon. So we'll see it from both sides tomorrow. We'll see lots of box kicking, and it's just on the day who can win those moments. The other area I think that would have concerned me at the start of the tour is the Lions line-out. I know they've come up against how many games have they had? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's been 6 games, and I think the Argentina game, they lost a few crucial lineouts and ended up losing that game. Most of the other fixtures, I think the lineout's been very, very strong and their set piece. But Nick Frost and Jeremy Williams are good in the lineout, and I think that's an area knowing Laurie Fisher, and they will try and go after the Lions lineout. So again, I think the Lions can cope with that, and it'll come down to moments of. I think Australia will have to defend very, very strong and physically, and with a lot of line speed. And if they can get off the line and mess up the Lions' attack, I think they've a great chance in the game. But it just depends on how the Lions control their possession and ball. And in Finn Russell, you've got this just phenomenal rugby player, haven't you? But the one thing I would say about Finn Russell is, and he's matured a lot, and I think that's why his performance has been so good in the last 12 months. Not that it haven't been good before that. He's always been able to come up with a 9 out of 10 or a 9.5 out of 10 performance, but he's also able to come up with a 4 or 5 out of 10 as well, where he's gone kind of wild on the crossfield kicks or thrown stupid passes or trying to be too ambitious in what he's trying to do. I think there's a lovely balance there, and there's a confidence about him, and he's a real swagger about him in the way he plays. So yeah, if he gets really good ball, but I'm sure that Ikitau will try and run at him a lot, that Australian back row will try and get into his channel as well and test him, as the Lions will test Tom Lynagh. But look, I think the Lions are going to be too stronger. I may be wrong. I hope for the sake of the tour that it's not too dominant if the Lions win. I'm not out.
Point on,
I'm not ruling out an Australian win here, but
felt this series, the games. Yes, the Argentina was good, and then the Waratahs gave them a good shot and the Brumbies as well to a certain extent. But the matches haven't exactly been picture perfect and a real appetite for the rugby purists and the fans. So we need for the Lions brand and everything this series to be at least fairly competitive, which I actually think it will be, and Australia might surprise a few.
No, I think Australia will definitely surprise a few people. I think from their point of view, if they had Valentini and Langy Gleeson as well, he's another really good back row player. Skelton, Skelton's the kind of fella you could throw him into any environment and he'd just kind of be rubbing the hands together. I don't know how fit he is. Obviously he has a calf injury, but he can cause any team problems. Tanielo Tupou, he doesn't get selected. I think he's not fit enough, and I think he's incredibly powerful, physical specimen of a rugby player. But this game is going to be intense, and I think you've got to have not sporadic moments. You've got to have regular moments in this game, positive ones like making your tackles, making your clean out, not being a vulnerable, not being a vulnerable option to, a back running at you in midfield if you're out there as a tight head prop, and I think he's not selected on the basis of that. Reading some of the reports here, that's the reasons. I think they'll be competitive. I do believe, and I believe from the start that Joe will have a strategy and a plan, and he'll be thinking about this and scrutinising. He's a phenomenal man to scrutinise opposition. And part of me thinks it's the second test where they'll probably be better, because they'll have a game under their belt and they'll probably have stuff that they feel they can fix and they can work on. And that's the intrigue of these three matches we've seen in the international three test series and summer matches over the years. These games can change from week to week, but yeah, from everyone's point of view, I think obviously the Lions will want a dominant win. They'll want to get a great performance and get the series up and running for them. But yeah, for any neutrals out there, I think they would want Australia to do well and hope that this series is competitive. We don't want to see it. We want to see a competitive series. We want to see Australia causing the Lions problems. We want to see loads of tries in an ideal world, but I'm not sure we're going to get that. I think we're going to see plenty of kicking tomorrow, and we're probably going to see a cup rugby type approach from both sides, just trying to get the points on the board, squeeze the opposition, and obviously if it's on, to go for it. But first and foremost, it's about squeezing the life out of the opposition and getting a result here.
Last couple on, with Ireland doing so well over the last number of years, Grand Slams and titles, and so heavily dominant. And yes, I get it, these coaches are at the top of their game. They're obviously going to get scrutiny anytime they lose. But because he's picked so many Irish players, is he open for more scrutiny, or is that just coming with the territory?
No, of course he is. And I think from an Irish point of view, I've always kind of felt that if Andy Farrell said jump, we'd all just say how high. I think he's earned the right to kind of make these calls. He's the head coach, so he has that right. But I just think from an outsider's view, I think, and even with some of the calls, maybe the selection of a lot of the Irish staff, a lot of extra players, even Jamie Osborne, Thomas Clarkson coming in, raised a few eyebrows. I kind of trust Joe. I trust Andy in the fact that I've seen him in the last number of years, and he's an inspiring coach. He's an inspiring presence. Is there more pressure on him? Yeah, if they don't win this series, of course, people from England, Scotland and Wales will say, well, one of our players should have been there, you picked too many Irish, or you were too loyal to the Irish. And that's the nature of the beast. He knows that. But I doubt that will happen. It could happen. Sport is it can throw up some crazy things at times. But yeah, there is a little bit more pressure. But he's as I said, should he be questioned? Of course he should be questioned. That's the nature of the business. But I just think he has earned the right to make these calls. And even if they're top-heavy Irish, I think I'd be surprised if this team doesn't do well here and win a series, and that's the main goal and the effort. But if they were to lose a series here, yes, of course there'd be plenty of scrutiny, but it's part and parcel of it.
Last one, Al, if Australia are to beat the Lions, and their pack is, I suppose, smaller, I think, or we've certainly got less ball carriers in them with the injuries they have. Which way do you see it going, and how do they beat them if that is the case? Will they chuck it wide?
Yeah, well, I think if you go back to Australia, England last November, I think that particular game, I just loved the execution of the Australian team that day. And, England came right back, scored near the end, and you thought, oh, Australia were leading, and then Jorgensen scores that try late on. I just think for them to beat the Lions, they've got to score tries. Again, that sounds quite obvious. And that's,
You don't think they'll be doing it by 3-6-9, is your point?
Well, I doubt it. I doubt there'll be, of course, there might be opportunities to kick some penalties, of course. And if you go back to the first test in 2013, I know it's a long time ago, and I just look back at the results of them and watch some of the stuff from them. Curtly Beale has a kick right at the end of the game. It's inside the Aussie half to try to win it. Lions won 23-21. Australia came out the week after, and they were brilliant, and those passes were sticking, and those offloads were happening, and they played a probably 8 or 9 out of 10 right across the board, and they got a result. The third test, they looked fatigued, they looked beaten up, the Lions were angry, they were physical, and you sense that that's possibly how this could go. That if the Lions flex their muscles,
2013 were freakish as well, mind you.
Yeah, they were, of course they were. But I think if the Lions flex their muscles and are allowed to, and there's any sort of standoff, blasé approach from Australia, if they're not on it, all their pack constantly and really physical and aggressive, and if they get in the line, they've got to get in this Lions team's faces and really frustrate them. They look back at the Waratahs and the Brumbies opportunities they created and tries they scored. I think they're on the back. They know that they're the underdogs here, and if they get the emotional pitch and intensity right, and they match the Lions for physicality, I think of course they can score. You get the ball to Jorgensen and Sualihi and Ikitau, they're X factor players, and they can make kind of magic things happen. So you feel Australia need a couple of magical moments in the game, and if that happens, then it's down to character and can you withstand the surge that will come back from that. But I think from an attacking point of view, they're a very, very dangerous side, and if they get parity in what happens up front, I think they have a great chance. But I suspect that the Lions won't give them those opportunities, and they'll probably have more possession, and they'd probably have that physical power to win gain lines and overpower this Australian side.
A quick prediction. I think I can tell that you think Lions will go one up anyway.
Yeah, maybe 24-12 or something like that, or 24-13. I think there's 10 or 12 points probably favouring the Lions here, and again, that's not crazy to suggest that. Really hope it's a close one. I really hope Australia make the Lions work and cause them some issues and problems, because it's exciting then, isn't it? But yeah, I think the connection with Joe obviously is a nice one for Ireland as well. People want to see him do well, but there's so many Irish players here. It can only benefit from an Irish point of view, the Irish team. So yeah, I think of course I want the Lions to win, but I hope it's I think from what we've read and kind of looked way back in this Lions tour, we're talking a year, 2 years that Australia have been struggling and they haven't been consistent. Their World Cup was poor in 2023. So yeah, I think Joel finds ways to cause the Lions some problems, but I'm just not sure it's going to be enough.
Al, we'll let you get some sleep under 24 hours, kick off with the Suncorp, and we'll be chatting next week to review the first test and look ahead to the second. Thanks, Al.
Cheers, Stuart. Thanks.